Hello and welcome to a special discussion on the outcome of the Gujarat elections for the Wire.in. Paradoxically, both parties have claimed victory and yet both have also suffered serious reverses. That is the first issue we should look at today. But after that, I want to look at what I call the hidden truths lying underneath both the campaign and the election results as revealed by CSDS surveys. That's the second issue we shall touch on today. My guests are Professor and Director of the Center for the Study of Developing Societies, Sanjay Kumar, and the Associate Editor of the Hindustan Times and author of How the BJP Wins, Prashant Jha. Dr. Kumar, let's start with the actual outcome and then I'll come to your wonderfully revealing surveys. Now, I accept that the BJP lost 16 seats and has been reduced to double digits. But that apart, it's still gone on to score a sixth consecutive victory, something very few parties in India have ever achieved, and it's done it in the teeth of the ill effects of demonetization and GST, and in the face of the disaffection of the Patidars, the Dalits and the OBCs. Surely, even if its numbers are reduced, this is a very creditable performance.
No doubt, a win is a win in any election. So BJP deserves the credit that they have been able to win sixth time in a row an election in Gujarat. You did mention very few parties have been able to do that. I think the other state is West Bengal, where left front government actually managed to win 7 elections in a row. So the credit goes to BJP, but this is a different kind of a win. The party which manages to win election doesn't feel very happy about that, and a party which has actually lost the election feels happy about, not about losing the election, still about the performance, the way they have performed. And it is all about the seats, not about nobody is looking at the vote estimate. It is all about seats.
And I'll come to that aspect in a moment's time. And when we talk about the seats, I also want to talk about your survey and what they reveal about both the campaign and the results. But let me put the opposite question to you, Prashant Jha. Congress has claimed that this is a moral victory. My question is that a credible claim or is that just runaway eloquence? Because here is a party that was unable to defeat a government that's been in existence for 22 years, despite the fact GST and demonetization were working with the Congress and against the sitting government, and despite the fact large classes of people, the Patidars, the OBCs and the Dalits, are annoyed with the BJP. If in those circumstances Congress still can't win a majority, then what right do they have to claim this is a moral victory?
I'll begin with what Sanjay ji said. A victory is a victory, a defeat is a defeat. And the bottom line is that Congress lost this election, despite the vulnerabilities which were the BJP's, right? And for the Congress to capitalize on. Having said that, if you go back 6 months, Karan, this was after the UP victory. The BJP seemed invincible and the Congress had plummeted to its lowest and has continued to sink post 2014. It is in that context that the Congress performance of getting around 80 seats, which is almost double, because do remember that Congress had shrunk to 44 seats in the Gujarat Assembly after the defection of 13 MLAs during Ahmed Patel's Rajya Sabha election. The Congress has been able to substantially increase its vote share and substantially increase its seat share, marginally increase its vote share. I think there are a few elements and few reasons why the Congress is feeling good. I will not get into whether it's a moral victory or not. The first is what this election has done is that it has projected a different image of Rahul Gandhi. Rahul Gandhi till now was either seen as incompetent or reluctant or an object of mockery. With this election, with his consistent campaigning, with his disciplined messaging, Rahul Gandhi has started to be taken more seriously, and I think that's one reason why the Congress is feeling good about this election. The second is that Congress has finally figured out one response to the secular communal binary that the BJP has capitalized upon.
By becoming partly communal itself.
By what it has done is has reinvented the kind of politics it was doing. It was by appeasing, or what the BJP called appeasing, but by wooing minorities publicly, BJP was able to construct a majority vote. What the Congress was able to do with Rahul Gandhi's temple visits was present a new model of secular politics, unfortunate as it may be for many people who are traditional secularists, of wooing the majority publicly and allying with the minority privately.
What you're dressing up and making sound grander than it is actually they played a light saffron card to the BJP's clear and obvious saffron card.
Unfortunately, given the polarized political climate of Gujarat and given how Hinduized India's polity has become, this is tactical sharpness.
Let me put it like this. At the end of the day, even though you don't agree with the phrase possibly that this is a moral victory, Congress has claimed it repeatedly. Rahul Gandhi has been said to have said the same thing. The problem with the claim moral victory is that it sounds very much to me like the compliment or a consolation prize the loser gives himself. Because this sentiment, moral victory, will last for a day or two and then be forgotten. What counts is winning, and the BJP as a result of winning is in power for 5 years. No one can deny that, and the moral victory phenomenon or sentiment will disappear in 3 days' time.
There is no denying that BJP will be in power in Gandhinagar for 5 more years and Congress is stuck on the opposition benches. But I think what is also clear is that there are foundations for the Congress to build on in terms of leadership, in terms of the responding to the secular communal binary, in terms of the issues that the Congress has been able to capture in terms of rural distress and youth unemployment. If Congress can build upon it, then Congress may have something to run with.
There's a huge big set of ifs there, but let's for argument's sake assume that they can build on it. Let me come to your polls at this point of time, because we've done a series of surveys and I think I want to spend a certain amount of time talking about them. Now, your survey that came out at the end of November suggested that this was a neck and neck race with the momentum on Congress's side. And at that point of time, end of November, the critical question was, will the momentum develop and take Congress to a clear victory, as Yogendra Yadav for one had actually predicted, or might Mr. Modi be able to stage a campaign that checks the momentum, perhaps even reverses the momentum? When you now look at the results, would you say Mr. Modi succeeded in turning the election around?
Absolutely. If you look at the results gives you a clear evidence that Prime Minister Modi was able to actually change the momentum. By end of November, there was a momentum in favor of Congress. But if we look at the result, if the momentum had continued, Congress should have won this election. As you rightly pointed out, Professor Yadav has indicated that Congress should win this election, and he projected it on the basis of the imagination that the momentum would continue.
And
but look at the
credit for actually ending the momentum, ensuring it doesn't continue, and in fact reversing the trend, that credit goes to Mr. Modi almost single-handedly.
Yes, if we look at the events which has happened after the 30th of November when we did our last poll, I think one significant event is that after that Prime Minister Modi campaigned aggressively and he addressed lots and lots of rallies, about 30 rallies between 30th of November and say 12th of December. And we have some evidences from the studies which we have conducted that this actually made a change in the mood of the voters of Gujarat.
In fact, it's that evidence I want to come to. When you did a post-poll survey, which was roughly 2 weeks after your end of November survey, you actually discovered that 43%, 2 out of every 5 voters, were going to make up their mind only in the last 2 weeks. In other words, they were going to make up their mind in that period between your second survey and the post-poll survey. And you discovered that 53% of these people chose to vote for BJP, only 38% for Congress. And the second thing you discovered is that what you call the late deciders, that percentage had increased phenomenally compared to 2012. In 2012, there were just 31. Now there were 43, an increase of almost 33%. So these, I take it, are the people that Mr. Modi appealed to, who accepted his appeal and turned the election around for him.
No, absolutely. If I want to cite some more data on that, we compared these late deciders from Gujarat 2012 election to 2017. We also tried to compare whether late deciders are in similar proportion in other states. If we compare it with other states also, the proportion of late deciders in Gujarat in 2017 is much higher compared to other states. If we look at the data, I think it is very, very clear that during last 2 weeks, what happened during the last 2 weeks of campaign, and there are some other evidence which you may wish to cite, or I would also like to mention, that this is the period when we saw kind of a more Hindu consolidation happening in favor of BJP. What BJP was trying to do, and that was Prime Minister Modi trying to address in the rallies, because Congress was trying to build a caste coalition in the name of Hardik Patel, Jignesh and Alpesh Thakur. If you wanted to overcome this caste coalition, you had to have a bigger narrative than that. And I think Modi tried to build in his campaign a bigger narrative that was of Hindutva.
So not only do the late deciders give Mr. Modi a sizable group of people that he can seek to influence in the late period. But secondly, it's the character of the people this group comprises of that also is something you pointed out. Because you say that when you did your survey in November, 45% of Hindu voters said they would vote for the BJP. When you did your post-poll survey, that figure had jumped from 45 to 52. And I take it that 7% increase is a direct result of the fact that Mr. Modi in that late phase appealed to them directly in a sort of Hindu, some people say communal manner, and got them to vote for the BJP. So we have two factors here. One, these are probably late deciders, and secondly, they're probably Hindus, and they responded directly to that appeal that Mr. Modi made in the last 2 weeks.
See, couple of facts are clearly evident. One, there are sizable number of late deciders, and we established this causal, like a correlation that who are these, why these people may be the late deciders, because they may have got influenced by the campaign pitch of Narendra Modi. If we look at proportion of Hindus who said that they are likely to vote for BJP by the end of November, which was roughly about 43-45%, and when we look at the final results after the after votes were counted and when we did our post-poll survey, the proportion of Hindus who voted for BJP has gone up. If we try and put these figures together, we see that there is some kind of a relationship between late deciders. Who are these late deciders? They are more among the Hindus, and they tended to vote more in favor of BJP, giving BJP such a huge
So you
lead.
can draw a correlation between three things: the percentage of late deciders, the percentage of Hindus and how that increased, and Mr. Modi's appeal.
And one more thing, how did these people who are the late deciders, what is the voting preference of these people compared to those voters who were the early deciders? If we look at the early deciders, BJP, they did not vote in such bigger number as the late deciders in favor of BJP. It is 53, and earlier it was roughly about 47.
And this also in a sense confirms the analysis we're trying to suggest, that late deciders are Hindu and they got influenced by Mr. Modi, and they were the people that he was specifically targeting. They were the group that helped him turn the election around.
Yeah, absolutely, because there is a clear evidence. Late deciders tended to vote more in favor of BJP compared to the early deciders. So these are the late deciders who made a difference for BJP.
Let's for a moment, Prashant, focus on the nature of the appeal that Mr. Modi made to these late deciders, who we have now established were largely Hindu voters as well. And we know from the figures that the CSDS surveys have produced that Mr. Modi's appeal was successful. But let's now look at the nature and quality of that appeal. In an article that Mr. Kumar wrote for The Hindu yesterday, that is to say the 19th, he calls Mr. Modi's campaign controversial and divisive. And he has a critical sentence. He says, he, Modi, practiced classic dog whistle politics by using coded language that might have stoked passions. Would you agree with that description and analysis?
I completely agree with that, and in an earlier discussion for the Wire, Karan, what we did speculate about was the impact precisely this kind of campaign would have. What did Mr. Modi do? He picked up one reference that Manishankar Iyer had made, took Rahul Gandhi's elevation and interpreted that as Aurangzeb Raj. This, remember, comes in a context when BJP had been hinting to the Gujarati electorate that the return of Congress would mean the return of Muslims, that this would be Muslim Raj. Then what does Mr. Modi do? He uses Kapil Sibbal's appearance in the Supreme Court on the Ram Janmabhoomi case to suggest that Congress was a party that wanted the masjid or wanted a delayed resolution of the temple case. What did I reported from the ground right after this, and what I did see was that this had energized the BJP's base. The BJP's base, which was demotivated about the election, which was a little unsure, suddenly felt more emboldened after the reference to Kapil Sibbal and Ayodhya. What did he do after that? He talked about the niche comment, and he interpreted that to suggest that Manishankar Iyer was calling him somebody from the low caste. I would not place this in the same category as the other issues, because I think in politics you take the license to interpret certain comments. Then that niche comment is not the same as the other communally divisive rhetoric that he used. But the final allegation that he made, where he suggested that at a dinner at Manishankar Iyer's house, there was a joint Congress-Pakistan plot to either insult Narendra Modi or to sabotage BJP's prospect. What was he doing with that? He was suggesting to the Gujarati electorate, look, we have the fifth column here, which are Muslims. Who represents them? The Congress party. Who are they hands in glove with? Pakistan. And who can represent national interest best? It is us. So all of this seems to have energized the BJP's base and machinery, and also among the fence sitters who could have possibly gone to the Congress, floated or planted an element of doubt about the Congress and brought them to
and
the
won
BJP.
them over as well.
Won them to
So
the
how
BJP.
would you then describe, if I asked you to give me a word or a phrase, the nature of the appeal that Mr. Modi made? Would you call it light saffron, which is a term we used a moment ago for Rahul Gandhi? Would you call it majoritarian? Would you call it communal? Which of the three?
It is majoritarian and communal.
Majoritarian and communal.
It is. And this is something that should not surprise us, because this has been ingrained in BJP's politics and is a fundamental element of their ideological political framework.
I want to come back for a moment, Dr. Kumar, to the wonderful results your surveys have shown. In a moment ago, we've established who were the people that Mr. Modi was appealing to. They were the late deciders. We've established that they were Hindus, and in sizable numbers between the end of November and voting, they actually began to vote in bigger numbers for Mr. Modi. But you also have figures that suggest where these people were located. You suggest that in fact there's an interesting correlation between the size of the BJP's majority over Congress and the quantity of Muslims living in that constituency. You say that in a constituency where the percentage of Muslims is under 10%, on average the BJP won with a 4% margin. But when the level of Muslims goes between 10 and 20, the BJP wins by a percentage of 6 times increase, 25% more. And when in fact the percentage of Muslims crosses 20%, the BJP lead becomes a 42% lead. These, I take it, are people that Mr. Modi must have been himself aware of, because the facts that you've revealed, I take it Mr. Modi must have in a sense known of. His own research service would have shown it. So he was targeting these constituencies, I take it, in particular.
It's very difficult to say that Mr. Modi was just trying to look at these constituencies, but when we actually analyze the entire results, we find these these findings, and based on these findings, I think these are good indication to suggest that. Also, you would know, Karan, that if community is in a small numbers, the majority doesn't fear much. The antagonism with the minority community is less. As soon as they are in sizable numbers, and that is what this data correlates. If they are in sizable number in constituencies where there are 20% Muslims, it is easier for any person to say or to establish that these the minorities would be kind of a you must fear them, or they can be a disturbing element.
The larger the minority element, the greater the claim that you must fear them, and therefore the greater the potential to communalize and polarize and get Hindus to vote on a particular pattern.
Absolutely, that is what the data establishes, that in all those constituencies where Muslims are in sizable numbers, 20% or more, while we know these are not too many constituencies, these are roughly 12 to 14 constituencies, but you look at the data in terms of the gap between BJP and Congress, how it jumps from 4 to 25 to 42. A clear
and
indication.
That correlates with the size of the Muslim community. 4 correlates with under 10%, 25 correlates with between 10 and 20, 42 correlates with a Muslim population above 20.
A clear indication that if you launch an aggressive campaign and if your tone is of that kind, you are able to mobilize the sizable majority community against the minority community, and this is what has happened.
There's an interesting corollary to this, which is that most people intuitively would feel the bigger the Muslim population in a constituency, the greater the chance that the BJP majority will be reduced, because there's a sizable section voting against it. In fact, it's exactly the opposite. The bigger the Muslim population of a constituency, the greater the BJP's majority will be, because the greater the potential to polarize and divide and get people to vote out of a sense of perceived fear of the Muslims.
No, absolutely, because normally we would tend to believe, or Indian voters would tend to believe, that if you have sizable number of Muslims, say 20, 25, 30%, then they would vote en bloc, and the chances of BJP or a party which is opposed to the minority communities would be less. But over time and again, it has been established that if the minorities are in sizable number, it is easy for a party to polarize the majority community by creating some kind of a fear psychosis in the mind of the majority community. If the minority is in small numbers, 5, 10%, the majority doesn't fear.
Because that fear doesn't then exist.
Yes.
You know, in an article you wrote for the Hindustan Times yesterday, that's your paper, the 19th, you drew attention to the elements in Rahul Gandhi's strategy, and there's one in particular that I want to discuss with you, the fact that he had crafted a sort of understanding or alliance with Hardik Patel's Patidars, with Alpesh Thakur's OBCs, and with Jignesh Mewani's Dalits. And you write, and I'm quoting you, when key caste groups get disenchanted, the BJP struggles. And this, you suggested, was one reason why the BJP, in a sense, was struggling. But you heard a moment ago Dr. Kumar say, and in fact he wrote in the article I mentioned in the Hindu, which he wrote yesterday, the following sentence. He says, by giving communal overtones to the campaign, the Prime Minister ensured a subsuming of these caste identities within the Hindu fold, thus helping the BJP to hold on to its bastion. Would you accept the argument he's making, that although Rahul Gandhi had a clever strategy in crafting together and bringing together three different alliance groups, Mr. Modi's Hindu overtone subsumed these castes under a Hindu umbrella and thus reduced or perhaps restricted the advantage Rahul Gandhi would otherwise have got from this alliance?
I'd like to answer that at two levels. The first is that this tension between a wider Hindutva umbrella framework and caste goes back to the days of Mandir and Mandal. We did see BJP try to create an overarching Hindu narrative through the Ram Mandir in the late 80s, early 90s. We did see Mandal, where different social justice, so-called parties which represented social justice platforms, tried to use caste to counter BJP's Hindutva mobilization.
Can I just interrupt there? You're absolutely right in making that point, because Mr. Advani launched his campaign, the Ayodhya Mandir campaign, in direct response to VP Singh's Mandal.
Absolutely. And so what we are seeing today is the same tension. When different Hindu caste groups get disenchanted with the BJP, ally with under a Congress umbrella or under the Samajwadi Party umbrella or under a JDU or RJD umbrella, then BJP loses. If BJP succeeds in, as Sanjay ji said, creating a larger Hindutva narrative, then the BJP succeeds. So this is something that we saw play out. I think there was an urban-rural distinction here. Mr. Modi's larger Hindutva framework and umbrella worked in urban Gujarat, where polarization worked. I think in rural Gujarat, because of other economic concerns, but also because of the caste issue, I think Congress's wider caste coalition may have succeeded.
Let's pick up on the point.
And I just wanted to add one thing, and you don't need to do much about creating this Hindu consolidation. You just have to create a fear psychosis in the mind of Hindus vis-a-vis the minorities, and they would automatically get consolidated. I think,
and you agree with the point he made a moment ago, and this BJP, is what Mr. Modi was doing with his rhetoric about Muslims, about Manishankar Iyer, Pakistan, etc.
He was not appealing to the Hindus to unite. You have to just create a fear psychosis in the mind of the majority community that these are the minorities who are not playing, not behaving in the national interest. So they are up to something which is not in the national interest. I think BJP did try to do that in Bihar, where they were not successful when we had caste coalition coming together. So they wanted to play this narrative in Bihar as well, where they were not
Didn't succeed in Bihar, but have clearly succeeded fairly effectively in Gujarat, particularly in the last phase.
Absolutely.
You wanted to say something?
I wanted to say that one of the things we heard in Gujarat was, does a Patel vote as a Patel or does he vote as a Hindu? In urban Gujarat, the Patel voted as a Hindu for BJP. In rural Gujarat, particularly rural Saurashtra, the Patel voted as a Patel for Congress.
This is a very interesting point he makes, because it takes me now beyond a discussion just of your surveys to some of the other interesting facts that have been revealed about the way people have voted. It transpires that there's been a very sharp urban-rural divide in the way people in Gujarat have voted. I'm quoting the Indian Express. They say that out of 58 urban constituencies, the BJP won 48, Congress won just 10. But out of the 124 rural constituencies, almost the opposite happened. The BJP only won 51, Congress won 67. Would you agree with his explanation for the urban-rural divide, that in urban areas, the Hindu narrative predominated and people voted as Hindus? In rural areas, people voted as Patels or whatever the other caste was. They were less susceptible to the subsuming Hindu rhetoric that Mr. Modi tried to capture them with. Would you agree with that?
First, there is no denial the fact which you presented, that BJP's vote share is much higher in the urban areas and far less in the rural areas. But it would be a mistake to say that BJP actually trailed behind Congress, at least in terms of support base. If we look at the vote percentages, actually BJP's vote share has gone up in all the three kinds of constituency: rural, semi-urban and urban constituencies as well.
It's just that they won less seats in rural.
It is only a matter of the vote which has been spread, and it is true that Congress has been able to win large number of additional seats in the rural constituencies and also the semi-urban constituencies. And the question which you posed, I think the caste narrative, because the caste narrative worked more in the rural areas and less in the urban areas. In the urban areas, it was more about the religion, the Hindutva card, and also appeal for Modi. Prime Minister Modi is more among the urban areas. Another fact is look at the profile of the voters in the urban areas. Urban areas voters are more educated, more urban they are, more educated, more upper class, and this is also the constituency, the core constituency of BJP. So the core constituency BJP is, it is easy for the BJP to actually have a top up when you have a bigger sizable number of sizable core constituencies.
There's also an interesting corollary to what you're saying, because when you began by saying that in fact the BJP vote share in all three types of constituencies has gone up, urban, and rural, what you're saying also by implication is that the BJP got more votes than it needed in seats which it won, and it would have done better if some of those votes had been in seats which it lost, because then it would have won more seats altogether. They were wasted votes in other words.
Just to cite the data, 56 constituency BJP won by a margin of 20,000 plus, and 20,000 plus vote margin for Congress is only for the 13 seats. So that's a clear evidence that if BJP's votes were hugely concentrated in these 56 constituency, if the votes were spread in some other rural constituency, BJP would have won more seats.
Now, Congress had set a lot of hope in winning constituencies in cities like Surat, where the diamond traders and the textile industry had suffered hugely, first with GST, but even earlier with demonetization. But it didn't happen. BJP virtually swept the ground in Surat, and I'm told it swept the ground similarly in Ahmedabad, in Vadodara, in Rajkot. In fact, the Hindu has claimed yesterday, the 19th, that of the 40 constituencies that exist in the 6 big towns, the BJP won 36. Does this mean that most analysts either got wrong or at least exaggerated the impact, the adverse impact of demonetization and GST on voting patterns?
I do think that there was a lot of anger on GST in cities like Surat right after the implementation and rollout of GST. But I think BJP was quick to respond. At the Guwahati meeting of the GST Council, there were corrections, and we did see anger on issues like GST dissipate over the past month and a half. So I think traders...
So that correction at Guwahati was critical?
I think the correction at Guwahati was critical in dissipating urban anger. I think the other factor was that BJP, through its communal narrative that we spoke about, also was able to stoke in large parts of these cities this fear that Congress return would mean a return to lawlessness. What they projected was that when Congress was in power, there used to be riots, there used to be curfew. We were able to prevent it, and we know that traders want predictability, they want stability, they want security, and I think that also works.
So the BJP in a real sense hit all the right buttons. A, the Guwahati correction, B, creating fear that a Congress majority would create instability, and that would damage the entrepreneurial instincts of the very trader community we're talking about.
Absolutely.
You know, one of the things that Rahul made a big point of, Dr. Kumar, was this claim that the Gujarat model has failed or isn't working. Now, the results show that might have been true for the perception of rural voters in Gujarat, but clearly it wasn't true for the perception of urban voters, because there, despite the hit of, and the adverse hit I'm talking, of GST and demonetization, and despite the class disenchantments that cover the Patels, the OBCs and the Dalits, people still in urban Gujarat looked upon the Gujarat model not just kindly, but with a sense of admiration and with a sense that it's benefited us.
No, I would go largely along with what Prashant has said. BJP tried to project a situation that if Congress comes to power, there would be lawlessness in the state, and we all know the traders, what they don't want, if there are some strict rules about taxes, etc., they can they can live with that. But if it is lawlessness, they fear that lawlessness much more than anything else. So all this, yes, they have been critical about BJP's bringing about GST demonetization, but through the surveys we also noticed that the anger which was about GST actually came down by the end of or early December. We actually noticed this in our survey.
Did Congress fail to pick up on that fact, that the Guwahati correction had ameliorated much of the anger? And secondly, that Congress is associated with instability and lawlessness, and the BJP, in stressing that danger, was finding a way of ensuring that the trader community, the textile industry community stayed loyal to them. Did Congress fail to pick that up?
See, Congress kept saying at times, not in the campaign but at several places, that This is what we have been saying. You bring down the tax rates, etc. But I think for the voters, even if Congress was trying to communicate that, but I think the voters, especially in the urban areas, the traders which we are talking about, they finally thought that at least this government which brought about GST, we have been unhappy about the rates, that GST, at least they listened to us. So they were ready to respond to our demands, ready to respond to our anxiety.
So the image that people have in Gujarat of Congress as being a party that's not necessarily trader friendly, not necessarily industry friendly, proved stronger than the damage that GST in the early days was doing to trader interests.
I think one big thing about this demonetization and GST, we kept hearing that there is a lot of anger, but I think finally the point through which BJP was able to score and win back most of these traders was that they gave an image that we are responsive to the anxieties. So if you were in a trouble, you are our core constituency, if you were in a trouble, so we responded to that immediately. We didn't take so much of time.
Better the devil you know when he responds and accepts that he's made mistakes than a new person whose problems and anxieties you may not have never anticipated, and so why take that risk?
That is what BJP tried to do throughout its campaign, especially during last 14 days, to establish this relationship that if Congress comes to power, look at the kind of fear or look at the kind of uncertainties you are going to have in Gujarat. So this is what you rightly said. You know that this is a party which has, this brought about GST, etc. But these are the problems they have been able to rectify.
Prashant, there are two other sets of facts that have been revealed by the results that I want to put to you. First of all, the Indian Express claims that there were at least 13 constituencies, and possibly there could be more, where the total number of votes won by the NCP and the BSP were greater than the margin by which Congress lost. So in these 13 constituencies, if there had been a straight 1-to-1 fight between Congress and the BJP, no other third party candidate, though there may have been independents, would Congress have won these 13 seats? And if it had, would Congress have ended up winning the elections as well?
It's very difficult to quantify whether the Congress would have got all the votes that went to NCP and BSP in all these seats, but it can be, I think, quite clearly surmised that if these votes had to go to the BJP, they would not have gone to these fringe third players. The political grapevine in Ahmedabad was rife with rumours that, in fact, certain third forces or fourth forces or independents were put up by the BJP to precisely split the votes that would not have come to them. So this constitutes an element of shrewd election management that any party does. BJP has done it, and maybe Congress can pick a few lessons from it.
But this also suggests that the Congress should have realized the danger that the anti-BJP vote could split to its detriment if there are too many competitors like the NCP and the BSP in the arena alongside Congress candidates. And Congress therefore should have thoughtfully done more to ensure that wherever possible it was a straight fight by keeping the NCP and BSP either out or by securing an alliance with them whereby both don't contest against each other.
Indeed, I think this was something that had come up. The trade-off for the Congress was whether they would be willing to give a certain number of seats to a party like NCP and whether that was worth it in terms of getting the number of votes that they would have gotten these 13 seats.
That could have been a mistake.
I don't know whether that, in a retrospect, because they have lost, you can suggest it's a mistake. But if you had given 15 seats to NCP, we are not sure whether the NCP was in a position to win those 15 seats. So it's a trade-off. It's a difficult political call that all parties have to make when alliances are stitched.
It's always easy to be wise after the event. I accept that point. The second fact that's come up, and I want to put that to you as well, is that it emerges that something like 5.5 lakh voters actually went for Nota, and that amounts to an astonishingly high 1.8% of all voters who cast their votes. Now, clearly these are people who were disenchanted with both the main parties, BJP and Congress. But do we have any way of knowing who the Nota vote benefited more, the BJP or Congress, or is it impossible to say?
I think what it shows is, from what I picked up, in over 25 seats, the margin, the number of votes Nota got was higher than the victory margin. Which
29 such seats.
29 such seats, right? So 29 such seats. Now, we don't know whether all the Nota votes would have gone to one side or the other. If it had gone to one side, clearly if the victory margin was lesser than Nota, then that side would have won. It could have gone to different sides. I would not be able to tell you who would have benefited more, but clearly it's a rising...
This is one of those intriguing questions that you can never answer conclusively. One of the what ifs.
But out of these 29 seats, which have been decided by very less margin, and in these 29 seats, Nota is more than the victory difference between defeat and victory. 14 have been won by BJP and 13 have been won by Congress. So in terms of which party would have benefited, going by, but there is a clause that if all the nota vote would have gone to one party, but no party stands to be gaining exactly that, because it is divided between the two
So
parties.
this is really a question to which you can speculate forever, but you
Yes.
can never conclusively say it either benefited or disadvantaged one or the other. It probably benefited and disadvantaged both of them probably equally.
Because both the parties have been what they have been doing. The party spokesman for the last couple of days, BJP spokesman kept telling that we lost 14 seats by very narrow margin. They won't cite the data of Congress. And Congress spokesperson say we lost 13 seats by narrow margin. In fact, it actually equalizes. So nobody is a gainer, nobody is a winner in terms of winning seats or losing seats by narrow margin.
Now we're coming to the end of this discussion, but I want to bring up two issues that you've raised, which I think are critical in the Hindu article you wrote yesterday, the 19th. First, you say, and I'm quoting you, the fact that a seemingly neck-and-neck election can be turned around in such a short span by appealing to the majoritarian impulses of voters raises troubling questions about the health of our electoral democracy. How worrying is this?
See, if you look at the whole narrative of the campaign, because a party is trying to pick up the issues, and the worrisome part is that if you can mobilize majority community, if you can arouse the passion of the voters, then all the real issues which should matter in election, which matters for the common voters, which is all about bijli, pani, sadak, etc., your school, your day-to-day necessities, all this gets washed away. Nobody now nobody bothers about those issues. When people go out to vote, they are voting on something else which is not visible. Things which are visible, they are not bothered about that, whether they have schools,
Can I
electricity
interrupt?
or not.
Would you go one step further? At the moment you're saying that if an election is determined on such issues that are issues of passion, which are issues of religion, which are issues of dharma, then the real issues of bijli, pani, sadak get forgotten and washed away. But would you go one step further and say that if an election is decided on what we've called majoritarian or communal issues, you also end up threatening the fabric and unity and harmony of our country?
Yes, this Gujarat election was not also an issue of religion or dharma, or it was kind of the last few days, the election actually turned into kind of creating a fear psychosis in the mind of the majority, and creating a fear that the minorities can create a problem to the fabrics of.
In fact, it was demonizing Muslims, to be honest, wasn't it?
Yeah, so that's a bigger worrisome. It is not only if you just keep saying, if a party keeps asking votes on the name of religion, which they can't, we know that. But if they do that, I don't think this is I don't see it as a huge problem.
But the demonization of minorities is.
Yeah, but doing it in a subtle way just to demonize the other community, that's a more worrisome part.
Now, Prashant Jha, there are 8 elections that are going to be happening between the start and the end of 2018. And if the economic growth of the country continues to languish at 6%, which in Indian terms is not considered acceptable or good, and if concerns about job prospects and employment generation continue the way they have for the last 3 years, is there a danger that as those election campaigns get underway, we will have more and more majoritarian or communal electoral appeals, and that the majoritarian strand in Mr. Modi's rhetoric will not just get louder, but more dominant?
I think there are two big economic red flags that the Gujarat election has waved at the Modi government. The first is youth unemployment, but the second is rural distress. I think what we are seeing across the board in rural Gujarat, but also in other parts of India, is that farmers are not getting prices. For their cost of production is often higher than the prices they are getting, and they are expecting the government to meet this by increasing MSPs. The government, for various reasons, is not being able to do that for products. Now, I think unless the government is able to sort out both the jobs question and the rural distress, farmer distress question, they are in for trouble. And if they are going to be vulnerable on this, we are going to see for recourse to exactly the kind of politics you spoke about. But I don't think it's something that's not been happening in any case. What we may see is an escalation of it. In UP we saw it, in Bihar we saw it, but we also have to remember that the 8 elections that are happening in different contexts. The BJP cannot go and practice the same kind of communal politics in Meghalaya. It will not work there.
But it can in Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Karnataka, Chhattisgarh.
It will try to definitely construct a majority vote by, as Sanjay ji said, demonizing the minority in pockets where you have substantial Muslim presence.
They certainly can't demonize the Christians in Meghalaya because Christians are a majority over there. Let me come to the second critical issue that your Hindu article of yesterday, the 19th, raises. You ask whether the BJP, and I'm quoting you, won fairly and squarely on the performance plank, or whether through divisive innuendos, falsehoods and fear-mongering. In a sense, I think I know your answer, but I'm going to nonetheless ask you, what is your answer?
It is quite obvious. If it was on development, Rahul Gandhi during his campaign kept asking questions about development. We failed to hear any response from any BJP leader on those questions. While we know what happened during the last few days of campaign, especially the last 7 days of campaign, the kind of high-pitched campaign and picking up the issues. So I would go along with what I have already written in Hindu.
That they won on the basis of divisive innuendos, falsehoods and fear-mongering.
Absolutely.
Which also means that you don't think they won fairly and squarely.
People say everything is love in fair and war, fair in love and war, and BJP leaders keep saying every election we take it as a war. It is not as easy.
But quite clearly, you as a commentator or as an analyst do not believe that all's fair in love and war. Here you do believe this wasn't fairly and squarely won.
Absolutely, this was because people keep asking questions. Why did Prime Minister campaign so aggressive? So why Prime Minister address so many rallies? I am not against Prime Minister addressing so many rallies.
It's what he says.
It is what he says.
And that wasn't fair and square.
That was not fair and square.
As a columnist writing in your paper, the Hindustan Times, yesterday you said, and you said it a moment ago in this discussion as well, a win is a win, a loss is a loss. So are we justified in bringing up this question of fairness when A, clearly there's been no allegation even of cheating, and secondly, the allegation or questioning of fairness hinges on the quality and style of the campaign rather than cheating. Is it a fair, justified thing to do?
No, I think, we may be uncomfortable with elements of what the Prime Minister is campaigning, and I was. But I do think that, the failure also lies of the opposition in not being able to construct a response to it and show that this is unfair and don't fall for this. The fact that he was able to get away is also, I'm not justifying the Prime Minister's campaigning. But I think it is important that you convince the electorate that, look, this is not the real issue. The real issue are the questions that we have been raising.
But then you've actually given a very different answer to the one Mr. Kumar gave. Dr. Kumar said that the BJP's winning the election on innuendos, falsehoods and fear-mongering was not fair and square winning. You're saying actually the fault lies with the opposition for not being able to counter.
I am saying that I am uncomfortable with the BJP's use of these elements in its campaigning. I think it is not right, but the fact is that unless you are able to convince the electorate that it is not right, the BJP will continue to use it and will continue to get away with it. They have been legitimately winning elections despite using this rhetoric.
Is this fair and square winning by the BJP? Clearly, Dr. Kumar says it's not. What's your answer?
My answer is that as long as you are getting the majority of seats in an electoral contest, you win, and we have to accept that in terms of electoral democracy. I think if we are uncomfortable with BJP's campaigning, you have to politically show to the electorate that this is not acceptable.
Which means that the opposition has to be the one that holds out and answers.
Absolutely.
And if the opposition doesn't, you can't blame the BJP.
No, as much as one is uncomfortable with it, BJP, if it gets away with it, will continue to practice the kind of politics it is.
We end on a very interesting point. I'm grateful to you for the candor and bluntness with which you accepted the BJP hasn't won fairly and squarely. That's your interpretation, but you have every right to it. You, on the other hand, argue that once an election is over, and if there's no allegation of cheating, then to raise questions of fairness is wrong, because we have to accept a win is a win, a loss is a loss. Well, now it's for the people of India to decide themselves, is this how elections should be won? And if this is how they are won, are we right in questioning whether they've been won fairly and squarely, or is that itself an unfair thing to do? Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining me today.